Franklin Delano Roosevelt was born in Hyde Park, New York on January 30th, 1882. He was born into a wealthy family. The Roosevelt family had acquired their money from real estate and trade. Franklin was an only child. The family had lived at Springwood, their estate in the Hudson River Valley in New York State. While growing up, Franklin Roosevelt was privileged and thought he was very important. He was educated by tutors and private tutors until age 14. The entire household revolved around him, with his mother being the most important figure in his life, even into adulthood. His growth was so unlike everyone else who he would later champion. In 1896, Franklin Roosevelt attended Groton School for Boys, a preparatory school in Massachusetts. The experience was a difficult one for him, as he did not fit in with the other students, for he had been tutored for his education until then. Groton men were athletic when Roosevelt was not. He strived to please the adults and took to heart the teachings of Groton's headmaster, Endicott Peabody, who urged students to help the poor through public service. After graduating from Groton in 1900, Franklin Roosevelt entered Harvard University, determined to make something of himself. Though only a C student, he was a member of the Alpha Delta fraternity, editor of the Harvard Crimson newspaper, and received his degree in only 3 years. During his last year at Harvard, he became engaged to Eleanor Roosevelt, his fifth cousin. She was the niece of Franklin's idol, Theodore Roosevelt. They married on March 17, 1905. After studying laws for a few more years and passing the bar exam, he started to think that law was boring and he set his eyes on greater accomplishments. In 1910, he ran for Senate in New York as a Democrat for a state that had been Republican for 32 years. In 1912, 2 years later, during the 1912 National Democratic Convention, Roosevelt supported presidential candidate Woodrow Wilson and was rewarded with an appointment as Assistant Secretary of the Navy. In 1914, he ran for the U.S. Senate seat for New York. This was doomed from the start as he had no White House support. He learned that achievements could not beat organization. The Republicans were not handling the Great Depression correctly, which Roosevelt took as an opportunity. He defeated Herbert Hoover in 1932. When he took office in 1933, there were 13 million unemployed Americans, which he helped solve, which was viewed as the greatest political achievement since the Civil War. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the 32nd president of the U.S. His most famous words were during his presidency when he said, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself."
So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
The Great Depression was a time where the stock market had crashed and there were many people unemployed in need of resources, and also wiped out millions of investors. FDR's solution to the Great Depression was the New Deal, which was not made by him. FDR labeled the plan and sold it to Congress and the public. The New Deal concentrated on 3 areas: relief, which provided jobs and food aid to those most in need by 1933, recovery, which preserved the major industry and economic sectors we would need to survive the Depression and rebuild the economy later, e.g. banking, agriculture, housing, and reform to change the laws and regulate the economy so that future depressions could be prevented. FDR established a minimum wage. He is the longest-serving president in the history of the United States. He created the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, also known as the FDIC, which is still used in our banking system today to ensure the security of individual accounts. Before the FDIC was formed, many people were pulling their money out of the banks, due primarily to the fear that their money could at any time disappear. After the FDIC was formed, people slowly began depositing money back into the banking system. He formed the Civil Works Program, also known as the CWA, which put many unemployed workers back into work. While on vacation, Roosevelt was diagnosed with polio. For a time, Roosevelt was resigned to being a victim of polio, believing his political career to be over. But Eleanor Roosevelt and political confidant Lewis Howe encouraged him to continue on. Over the next few years, Roosevelt improved his physical and political image. He also began to repair his relationship with New York's Democratic political machine. Roosevelt appeared at the 1924 and 1928 Democratic National Conventions to nominate New York Governor Al Smith for president, which increased his national exposure.
America at that stage was neutral, but generally sympathetic to